Hey, FanboyNation.
This is your pal Daffy Duck, and you're watching.
We're watching
Fanboy.
Fanboy, etc.
FanboyNation.
Dot, I assume Tom.
If you've been to the movie theater any time in the last 2 weeks, you would know that Superman has been #1 on its opening weekend and is set to make another $60 million during its second weekend. And you will recognize this man, Martin Harris, as how you doing, Martin? As the Barovian general in the conflict, which is a perfect role for him, having grown up in Poland, especially with the Soviet Union right next door, knocking things down. You know, how are you today, Martin?
Very good. Thank you for having me. And I'll add to what you just said. I grew up in Poland, but also I grew up as a little kid in East Germany. So I doubled up on being surrounded by communism. Yeah.
So you're just stuck with all the communists. So it was perfect for you to deal with a dictatorship in this film.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, touching upon that, you know, I mean, the wall fell down 35 years ago, and that was the end of it.
I've been there that day. I've been in Berlin when it happened. Yes.
So you were there when the wall came down.
Yep.
Wow. Okay, that's a fantastic story. That's something we got to talk about. What was that like, being in Berlin as the wall's coming down?
Well, I was a kid, so my parents, obviously they told me not to leave we had like 2 rooms in a small motel, because my father worked as a professor of history of arts, and he specialized in German art. So we would go for 4 or 5 months every year between 85 and 89 to East Germany, which was great at the time comparing to Poland, which was bankrupting as a country. So we didn't have anything in stores. And in East Germany, I could eat bananas and I could drink the local version of Coca-Cola. So it was almost like America for me, you know, going to East Germany for 4 months at that time. And I remember when that was happening, I didn't fully understand what's going on, but my parents were obviously made sure that that I stayed inside throughout the whole process, because there were people outside. Probably, you know, we didn't know how it's gonna end, right? You know, they've lived through it. They lived through communism. Right. So in the past, there were some events in Budapest, even in Poland in 1981, where, you know, people were attacked by police and shot and died, you know. So we didn't know what's going on. Obviously, it was history in the making. Yeah.
Yeah, and like you said, you never know if it's going to be a riot, if it's going to be peaceful. Yeah. Thank God it was peaceful. As I remember, I think I was 12 years old when the wall came down. So, you know,
it was peaceful, but there was a moment when I think there was a decision to be made. I felt like I actually worked on I lent my voice for a documentary on Netflix about that time called Turning Point last year. And I watched that, and then I kind of remember those things, because like I said, I was a kid, that apparently the leadership of East Germany that was very close with Soviet Union, they wanted to attack. They wanted to shoot the demonstrators, but Gorbachev told them not to. Told them not to do that. He was, you know, into change, into perestroika. So that's an interesting wrinkle that I wasn't aware of at that time. That it could have gone both ways. It went this way, but it could have gone the other way.
Wow. See, I just learned that it could have gone the other way.
Yeah.
Well, thank God you're safe. Thank God you're here. And you went from being a sports journalist covering the NBA to now being an actor, and you got out just in time, because the NBA has become nothing more than just a shooting game. You know, they're like, oh,
the players are making a lot of money right now. Like that's the money they're making. Like even players from like the bench players are making more than Michael Jordan did.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, and playing with half the effort.
Yeah. Unfortunately, yeah, that's what it is. But that's what I was doing. But kind of that wasn't my idea when I you know, started as a teenager. I had my heavy metal, progressive metal band that unfortunately we were supposed to record our first album, and then the band just stopped. You know, we had some arguments, and we didn't continue, and the world ended for me at this point. I didn't know what to do, so I was asked by the label to write some reviews for them about other releases, and that's how I got into media work. And I was a music music journalist at first, specializing in rock, heavy metal, and progressive rock, and I just couldn't pay my bills from doing that. So I added sports, and suddenly I had a big career in sports as a sports writer, and that was I kind of settled into that career. I never thought I'll do it for more than a year or two. I ended up doing it for like 12 to 15 years, and came here in 2007. I knew Kobe Bryant for about a decade at this point, and I asked him, like, what should I do? Should I stick to what I'm doing for the rest of my life, even if I don't feel it fulfills me, or should I go crazy and try acting and go to acting school and see what can happen? He said, "What is your heart telling you?" And I said, "My heart is telling me to try." He said, "Then always follow your heart." And he said it like looking into my eyes, and just delivered it with deadpan, like meaning it, like seriously. And that's when I made a decision to come over here. But I'll tell you this, until the moment he died, and I saw him 3 weeks for the last time before he died, which was a huge shock for me. I couldn't believe that for like a week at least afterwards. I ran into him at the Lakers game against Dallas Mavericks. I still remember that day, December 29th, 2019. He gave me a big hug, and that was almost like a farewell. But after he died, I kind of rethought what he was telling me back in 2007. I realized that I only took half of it into my life, which is following my dreams and trying acting, because I didn't do only that. I was doing other things. And since I thought about it, since he died, I decided I'm going to go into acting 100%. I'm going to give my full effort. And that's when I started really working quite a lot.
And through that, final decision of losing a friend like Kobe, you decided to, pursue it. And we've seen you in The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, Better Call Saul, Young Sheldon. You're in Superman right now, which is red hot. We totally excited about that because Superman could have gone either way. So being a Superman fan, and especially a DC guy, it was one of those things we were scared because Man of Steel was too dark, and Superman has to be hopeful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I rewatched when I found out that I booked that role, which was a big surprise for me because it didn't have a Superman on the breakdown. It had Genesis, a film called Genesis, and I didn't know what it is until I booked it, and like a week later I found out what it is, and I was super excited. So I started watching all the Superman movies. I have a friend, another actor who's a huge fan of Superman, and he was telling me all those things. And I rewatched them at least twice, and I liked even the Batman versus Superman as a film, but I just think the concept, thinking about what the comics were, what the character is, full of hope, like almost supernatural in a sense, like giving us a motivation to be better, to do better. It's about being good. I think that part was missing in those films that you just mentioned, and especially in Batman versus Superman, which I still don't understand why they were fighting each other. It was a good movie, interesting movie, but it missed from the comic standpoint. I think it missed for me that message, and I think James carried that message in his film, and I feel it's inspiring. It makes you believe that even in the world we're living right now, where it's just so much disinformation and hate, like stirring people, like making those emotions negative emotions. It's so easy to do right now because of social media, YouTube, and but it can also serve for the better. There's a power in all those channels to do good stuff, so it doesn't have to be dark. And I think that's what this film is inspiring people to like reflect and see, how we can be better.
Right. During the communism era, Superman made a little more sense in the fact that he was a refugee. And in my review, I touched that he's a refugee, not an immigrant, because there's a difference. Immigrant has the choice to come here. A refugee has no choice to go anywhere other than where they will be accepted. And so knowing you being Polish and how many people defected in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and then Iran in the 80s during the Iran-Iraq War, and Cuba throughout the last 70 years, and so many places that people have defected as refugees and cannot go back. With that element of Superman not being able to go back to where he came from, he has to adopt the American identity because his own identity has rejected him, or he's had to reject it for his own safety. And even the original story of Superman being an allegory of Moses, and then in a retcon eventually becoming a Christ-like figure, it shows that this refugee of being a man without a country. And so that was something that was always interesting about the character. And so to see how it got dark for a while, and now here we are again with the hope, it's exciting for Gunn's movie.
Yeah, let me ask you, because I'm kind of intrigued with what you said. I didn't think about that angle. Now, yeah, you're right. He's a refugee because that wasn't his choice to come here. He's an immigrant in a way, but more of a refugee, and that makes perfect sense. But let me ask you this, because obviously James is a huge fan of comics, and he knows so many things about comics. He knows those little there's so many little references in the film, Big Belly Burger and all kinds of stuff. Would you agree that this film is a tribute to the comic version of Superman?
For the most part, yeah. I think if he had touched the problem is not what James gave us, it's the reaction to it. And they politicized it for no reason. You know, it's a refugee story, it's a hopeful story, it's a story of someone who had a loving adoptive family that raised him up knowing that he was different than everybody around him and gave him the opportunity to go and help. So that's the most exciting part about all of this, is seeing those aspects. And James giving us Guy Gardner as he is in the comic books, bad haircut and all, you know, loved it. Mr. Terrific, same thing, you know, very fitting for the comic. Hawk Girl, she could have been a little more violent if we stuck with the comic, but everything went, you know, in a comic book movie that we wanted, and we got it. So I'm happy with that.
Yeah, interesting. You mentioned Mr. Terrific. I think my first TV role was on the show Startup that we filmed in Puerto Rico in 2016. I think that was my first job on a network show, and Eddie Gattegi was in that show. So it's my second go around with Mr. Eddie Gattegi. And same with Rachel Brosnan. You know, I worked with Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. We actually worked together on Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. We didn't work together on Superman, but I remember my first day when I came on set of Superman, and she wasn't there because they filmed, I think, the Daily Planet thing that they filmed in Cleveland. I filmed the Moravian Palace thing we filmed in Atlanta. But they were constantly, you know, talking. All the units were in constant communication. I remember my first day when I came to the set, I took to James' assistant and I said, please tell Rachel that Priest Piotr arrived to the set of Superman.
Nice little tie-in.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you finally realize that you're in Superman, and you know, you have the understanding of what communism was like and what a dictatorship looks like. And so that influences the part because of what you've seen in your early years, and then the hope of the expansion because the freedom that came with it after communism fell in Eastern Europe. You know, how does that influence the performance? Because yes, it's still comic book and science fiction, but there's an element of reality and that runs parallel to something that you already lived.
Yeah, 100%. Great question, because it's exactly why I think I got the part, and that's how I landed it. Because I assume, well, because we didn't get much information about the character, we didn't get, you know, much information besides, you know, a couple of lines. Initially, it was supposed to be, I think, 2 scenes. Then they added me the 3rd scene, and on the day they added me to 2 more scenes. So initially it was only 2 scenes. And there was not much information except of the fact that he works for a dictator. He's a general, and there's something going on. That was the audition scene, was the scene with the Hawk Girl.
Yeah.
So I think most of the actors went for the obvious. They played general tough and stern and military guy. And me knowing how it looks like in the dictatorship, how it looks like in the Eastern European country, he is tough to other people, but he's not tough to the dictator. So in my scene with the dictator, I have to be weak and scared, because like Stalin, when he was in charge of Soviet Union, he was killing his generals like for breakfast.
Oh yeah, the
They
closer you
didn't
got
have
to
the right
Stalin, the
haircut; they
sooner
were
you
just
were.
stupid.
What was the old saying? The closer you got to Stalin, the closer you were to death.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He was killing even his like the head of the army, I think, who won the biggest battle in the war. He got killed like a year later. So
Your scenes, you're in the presidential office. There's the we're not going to give too much away, but there is the pocket dimension, and there's a
yeah.
little bit of a trip to that. There's the green screen aspect of it going into this pocket dimension, but there's also when you finally get to pull back and see the finished film.
Mhm.
What is it like different for you as an audience member instead of a performer? Because it went from green screen to completed, imagery.
So we didn't do any green screen. It was all, and that was the biggest surprise for me. How the preparation level, like everything, even the paintings of Baravian president on the door, everything was there. That was actually a part of decoration. So every single scene. I don't know about how they filmed the pocket dimension. I think they actually constructed the pocket dimension. Maybe just the tunnel. There was a little bit of green screen. Not sure about that. But every scene, the conference scene, the hallway scene, the second hallway scene, the door, the place in his room where we start the war, when they call us from Lex's office, it was all real, all built. There were like even tiny little details on the table of the president, like his stamp with his name on it, which you cannot even see in the camera, but every single detail was there. And I'll tell you something else. What I was surprised by, how big was the storyline of Brady. I didn't expect it. I thought it's gonna be like a side story to because we didn't get the whole script. I'm sure Rachel, Lex, and Nicholas and David, they got the full script, but I didn't get the full script. I only got my scenes, so we didn't know how big. I was surprised how big the whole Brady storyline was in the film. I thought it would be a side story, but it was pretty much the main story.
Right. What I also loved about that and this conflict being real, so many people related it to real world conflicts.
Mhm.
And we can understand where they see that and where their ideology lies, but there's so many real world neighboring conflicts that have gone on for, even if we say just the last 100 years, let alone of all of human history, that it was easy to project the modernity of it and the political parallels. But these are two fictionalized nations going through these invasions, and it's interesting to see how the military industrial complex is depicted in this, because Luther is going to get a part of all of this. So it's all financial gain. It really wasn't, we hate our neighbors. It was just money, money, money. And so I like that aspect of it, because it didn't focus on the real world issues that we're facing right now, but it did really focus on the financial gain.
Yeah, and it's also about like good and evil in a way, because it's a domino effect. If you look at the film, and the Lex Luthor is at the top of it. He manipulates the president. The president is super tough and treats everybody horribly, except of Lex Luthor, when he's pretty much his puppet, right? And I'm president's puppet. Like he manipulates me. Like I can be bad to everybody else, but to president, like I open the door and I tell him that he's very handsome, which makes no sense. It's just my way of being serving. But and I'm the head of the Baravian army, and we start a conflict. So it's like this is how the evil spreads from the top to the bottom, because you can say Lex, then president, then me, then the army,
Sure.
and someone has to stop it.
Yeah, and that was also another beautiful aspect of the film, is that Superman stops a war from ensuing, and it turns into this giant international incident because, again, money is involved, power is involved. He's taken away the authority of Luthor, of the president, of the entire military. So it's very interesting to see how one action can change the entire trajectory of an international conflict and possibly make it worse.
Yeah, which also makes, because like right now, like I told you, I've seen all those old films, which makes a very interesting take on Lex Luthor. Comparing to the Lex Luthor from the first Superman movies, is a different character. I would say probably scarier overall than the one that Gene Hackman portrayed, because you don't find much humor in Nicholas's portrayal of Lex Luthor,
Yeah.
where Gene Hackman was kind of funny in a way.
As you sit there and reflect on finally following your dream, like you wanted to be a performer,
Yeah.
you had a detour, does it seem like it was the right path? Because if you had gone into it at 19, 20, you might have not been able to be as level-headed as you are after going in your 40s.
It's interesting because looking back, it's almost impossible to predict what would have happened if that happened. I felt like it definitely made me the fact that it wasn't easy, and because, for example, when I came here and I was starting in acting, it cost me my career in media. I mean, I was still trying to do both, but I wasn't taken seriously anymore by my ex-colleagues, in the sports writing field. I was Mr. Hollywood for them, so I had to stop doing that, and I had to find a different way. And I did a little bit of stand-up comedy, and I was even hosting and running a show at the Comedy Store, which brought a lot of great experience, but also some bad experience. Like, a couple of my friends who were comedians committed suicides. That was very hard. So overall, definitely a lot of different experiences, and I'm definitely using them for roles. But to be quite honest with you, if I started the age Nicholas Holt started, maybe I would have been a better actor because he started so early. I don't know. We'll see. I guess I'm taking my experiences, my life lessons into it, and hopefully that will help me moving forward.
So this also begs the question, having grown up in communism, I'm sorry I keep touching upon this, but also your parents lived it their entire lives till
Yeah.
1990. How do you make the phone call to the family and go, guess what? I'm playing a communist general.
Oh, I think they're used to it. I've been playing Russian roles before, and only one Polish role in Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. Plus, they know what I'm doing right now. And here's the thing: we were, because of my father being a scientist, so he wasn't a politician or like a prisoner. They were trying to live their life with what they had. They were trying to just continue living their lives. They didn't know any different. Now obviously they know different since they lived. My dad first 39 years of communism, my mom first 38 years of communism, but that was the only life they knew.
Right.
So when it's ended, a lot of that new world was quite shocking to them, and they can also reflect, and they could also say that they were in a way brainwashed, probably in some ways. They were never pro-system, but they were just never, they were not in the opposition. They were just living their lives, but in a way, like everybody else, we were kind of brainwashed.
And that's also another part of the film, is because how many people believed in Luther and his method, especially in the office scene. We'll just call it the office scene. And seeing the final product, how exciting for you to see it all come together? Because you only had your pages and your part of the performance that you really knew and knew well,
Yeah.
but now you got to see the final product. What was that like, being the audience member for something like this?
Well, I was scared, because of all the stuff being written online and posted online about, the political implications. I was very afraid that they're going to change something last minute, that they're going to remove something last minute. And then I go to see it and I see that James used like every single millisecond of me recorded on camera, which was extremely motivating, and I was so grateful for that. That everything I filmed is in the film. And he did cut a lot, because I even listened to his podcast yesterday, and he was talking about the scenes that he had to cut. He cut a lot, and from some very well-known actors. Because it's not about how big of an actor you are, but how does it serve the story. So I was very happy that I did my job, and it ended up in the film. So that was very important. Going back to the brainwashing thing, like there was one scene, and I didn't know if he's going to keep it in the film, but he did. I remember that very well. It was a conference scene when Zlatan Zlatko Buric, amazing actor who lives in Denmark. Uh, he did 2 takes of like a regular talk during the conference, and then James came to him for the last thing. He said, because he was talking about Baratheon women and Superman trying to make a harem out of them, and so James comes and he looks at, and he did this with me later. I'll tell you exactly which scene. So he comes to Zlatko and he says, and now do Moravian woman, and do like gesture like this. And Zlatko did that, and it ended up in the final cut, and it's very funny.
Yeah, no, it is.
The same where we were filming the post conference scene when I opened the door and he goes to meet Lex Luthor. On the final take, and that's great about James Gunn. Like, he sees those little things, that make perfect sense because they kind of add to the character, and people remember those like little moments. So he told me on this last take, when you open the door, eyes to the ground. Don't look at him. Eyes to the ground. Keep your head down. And then I see it in the final product. I'm like, wow, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense.
And working with James and then working with everybody that you did on this film, especially still being relatively young in your career in comparison to some of them have already been in there for 20 plus years, what do you see that you learned from them, and how, from what you've taken the experience on set, will you incorporate into your next project?
Well, the most important thing, and luckily I did my homework, because if I didn't do my homework for this one, there are some projects where you can kind of, work through it. In this case, no. I'll tell you what I mean. I worked on one film for Netflix. That was a big budget film that we filmed one scene in 2.5 weeks. And there was so many breaks, and there was so much time in between all those takes and multiple takes, and it took a long time, and they tried to perfect everything, and that's how it was. With James, we talked especially with his assistant for weeks before, but when I came on set, breakfast 8 a.m., 8:30 on set, and we did 5 scenes that day. We were moving 2 takes, third take something different, boom, new setup, and everybody knew where to go, in what place to be, what should be, what cost. Everything was planned, prepared, and everybody was doing their jobs. Everybody knew, their lines, their positions, the camera positions. You just have to be ready. You just have to be prepared. You have to do your homework, to work with James Gunn. James Gunn is a perfectionist, and I'll tell you something else, which I found out while filming Superman. Like, this guy was filming Superman Monday to Friday, 8 to 6, and then he would film Peacemaker on Saturday and Sunday.
Okay.
He worked nonstop. He didn't take any breaks, and he worked hard. Like, that wasn't just like messing around to like one scene and then we take a break. No, it was boom, 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 like that. The pace that was by far the highest pace on a big budget film I worked on ever. It's not even comparable. It's not even close. So that's what I also took from it. To be even, to be as much prepared as possible. When you want to work with James Gunn, you better know your stuff.
It also makes sense because he started off with indie films for so long that was the pace that they always had to take, because they only had a week to 28 days to film anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. Martin,
I was just impressed with his level of preparation. I haven't seen anything like that from any director so far. There was a good level of preparation on a bunch of projects that I worked on, but in this case, like, literally everybody knew their place and what they need to do, and it was going so smooth and so fast. I was really, really surprised. Oh, and one more thing, and I've worked on different sets. Some of them very serious, some of them everybody private, building their character. This one, we did some serious stuff, but everybody was joking around. It was very joyful, very relaxed. Nobody was tense. It was all very relaxed and friendly, and amazing atmosphere. Amazing.
That's fantastic. I'm glad to hear that, especially since I enjoyed the movie so much and you also enjoyed making it. Because sometimes you'll see a movie that you really love, and then when you talk to one of the actors that was in it, or it's an old film, and then you finally meet the star of it 10, 20, 30 years later, and they tell you how horrible of an experience it was that they don't even want to ever think about that movie anymore. It's almost disheartening and kind of takes a little bit of the joy away that you've had in watching it so many times that they didn't have a great experience. But it talks to their level of professionalism and be able to pull that off. But when you
Yeah,
enjoy a movie and then everyone enjoyed filming it, I think it makes it a little more special.
yeah, and I'll tell you something, and I'm not gonna give any names because he's a very good director. But I've worked with all kinds of people in the business. They have all their personalities. Like James is super relaxed and super friendly, and always smile at, like, of course he's serious when we have to, shoot and go through stuff, but even between takes he's joking around. And incredible human being. He's just a very good guy. But I've worked with some directors. One of them, who would just constantly yell at his assistant throughout the film, like, yeah, really bad stuff, borderline abusive stuff. And that was a little bit that was a little bit uncomfortable. He didn't do it to me, but he did it to his assistants and stuff. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
well, I'm glad you had a better experience this go around.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, it didn't affect me, but that was uncomfortable because I felt bad for those people. Those were some young, probably underpaid people, on set trying to do their best. I think one lesson I took from it, to just be kind to everybody because you don't know what they're going through
Right.
when you're not there. Yeah.
Martin, I'm going to leave you with this. You followed your dream. You've had multiple careers. Your life is worth a documentary by itself. What would you like to tell the people that are out there that are still too hesitant to pull the trigger on making the next move?
Well, listen, I've made mistakes. The biggest mistake I've made in the past, but I learned from it, is to pay attention to haters, to people that try to put you down when you have big dreams. And I think the key is not to let that affect you, or as Kobe told me, and that's what I started doing at some point. Use it as an armor. Use it as a weapon, in a way, to motivate you. So don't take it personally, but take it as a challenge. To make sure that you meet your own expectations. But the truth is, it doesn't matter. You just gotta follow your path. Do whatever you do, whatever you want to do, and just follow your path. It doesn't matter what people say. It doesn't matter as long as you're true to yourself.
Martin Harris, I really want to thank you for today. I'm glad that I have met you, and it's been a great pleasure. If you are on social media, where can we find you to connect with you?
Please follow me on Instagram. That's the only social medium I'm on. Martin_Harris LA, and I also posted some Superman stuff there.
Fantastic. Martin Harris, thank you so much for your time. Superman is in theaters now. It's still the #1 movie in the world. Congratulations on being part of such a fun film that really is the closest thing to transitioning a comic book into live action.